Hello there, I'm Catherine, welcome to my channel. The month of May is Asian Pacific Heritage Month, and I've seen a lot of videos made by Asian American YouTubers, and they are super nice, but here in Europe we're literally millions of people and I haven't seen this tag around, so I'm gonna make a video about this subject, growing up here in Europe as an Asian girl. I will follow the questions that were created by Vagabond Youth, and I've been inspired also by the video of Janin about the subject. They are both Korean American. So let's dive in. First question. What ethnicity are you? Both of my parents are Chinese. They're from a city called Wenzhou, and Wenzhou is a city that is an hour flight from Shanghai, but on the map it doesn't look so far away. And I grew up in France, next to Paris, and Paris is literally full of us Wenzhouren, so shout out to you if you're Wenzhouren, 一九呢. Second question. Which generation are you? Now that's a bit of a tricky question because my dad grew up in France. He arrived at age 9, and my mom arrived at around age 19 in Europe. She was first in Spain and then she went to France. Let's ask Wikipedia to be sure. Immigrant generations. First generation, 1.5 generation, second generation, 2.5 generation, 175, 125 generations. So I guess my dad is a 1.5 as he grew up in France. Does it make me a 2.5 generation? So third question. What is the first experience where you felt that demarcation of being a minority or different? I think I felt that I was different ever since I started school, because I didn't speak French. I was a very shy kid, and I would speak Chinese at home, and at school I would just not speak at all. Almost to anyone, like speaking would make me tremendously anxious because I would be afraid of making mistakes in French, which inevitably would happen because I wasn't fluent, right, in that language yet. And there were also a lot of racist comments almost daily about my origin, so whether it was about my eyes, about Asian accents in general, or about just like kids mimicking martial art in front of me, a lot of these. So yeah, it made me feel different, but at the same time I was in a neighborhood where we were all minorities, but it's true that there weren't a lot of East Asians. And later on I went to a nearly all white middle school, and that was even more difficult for me because we were even less people of color. Question 4. Were you always proud of your heritage, or was there a time you rejected it? Apart from asking my parents to turn down the Chinese music when they drove me to school, I actually identified as Chinese most of my life, because even though I was born in France, I had the Chinese nationality, which was very handy because every year my parents would go to China and visit family. So there was never really a question for me to be something else than Chinese until way later in my life. At 18 though, I was asked to either choose the French nationality and therefore ditching the Chinese one, or to keep being an official Chinese. China doesn't allow, unfortunately, to have two nationalities, so I really had to choose between one or the other, and I chose to become French. Because at the time I knew that I wanted to study abroad, and some schools do charge more when you're a non-EU student. And also because it's just easier to travel the world with a French passport, although now with the Chinese ones you have more and more advantages with the years passing. As I slid nationality, something changed for me. I suddenly could see that I couldn't be 100% Chinese. I didn't grow up there, I grew up in France. I didn't live there, I only went once a year for a few weeks. It couldn't make me be 100% of that culture. Is that even possible if you're living in a place where you have influences from other countries to be 100% of your own culture? I definitely identified more with the people I met in France, and my second generation Asian friends, they were also identifying as French people since years already. and I just never really considered it. For me, I wasn't French. So most of my life I would say that yes, I was proud of being of Chinese descendants. Not only because it was part of me, but also because I couldn't really identify with French culture at that time. And also about this being proud of my heritage or not, I've never really identified with advertising that I see here in Europe. You don't see a lot of Asians in advertisings, but in my case, I think it kind of saved me from picking on myself and on my body, because when I saw these blonde women or just mostly white women on magazine covers, I just didn't identify at all with them, and I know that's not the case with most people. We were just too different for me to wanting to look like them in a way, so I never felt really that pressure to look like them. So I think that was really teenager life saving. And I made a performance about beauty standards in East Asia, and I will link it here. And yeah, you will have more information about what I think about it each time I go back to China and I see advertisements with people that actually look like me, and I am very, very troubled. But concerning growing up here in Europe, I've always felt, yeah, quite close to my roots, and I didn't really doubt, or I was never really ashamed about being Asian here. Question number 5. What are some stereotypes that you struggle with? I think I'm quite lucky with this one, because even though I received really a lot of racist comments growing up, it didn't make me feel too uncomfortable in my own skin. I think it would be rather annoying for Asians that are not Chinese or Japanese who are living in France, because people just assume that they are Chinese or Japanese. Like in the street, they would just come to you and say ni hao and konnichiwa. Yeah, I would feel very annoyed if people assumed my ethnicity. Disclaimer: you can come to me anytime you want to say ni hao, if it's because you're curious about the culture or the language. But please stop it if it's because you want to provoke me or because you want to mock my culture. In that case, your greeting is just disrespectful. Another struggle that I have is the fetishism that some people might have for minorities. It's a bit like you're this rare butterfly that people want to pin in their collection of people they've slept with. And yeah, it's very tiring to think, is this person interested in me because there's an experience for them? I don't know. And Amandine Gay made a very wonderful movie that treats partially about the subject. She invited Black women living in Europe to talk about their daily experiences of racism. And yeah, this question of fetishism, and also the question of stereotypes that are among us ourselves, stereotypes that we have within our community of one another. All of this is talked about in the movie, but mostly about Black people in Europe. And there's another stereotype that is a bit more bloody. And the stereotype is that Asians carry a lot of cash. And it's bloody because this idea that people have that we constantly carry cash led to a lot of violence. I have been robbed myself, my mom several times. It's just like every Chinese family I know in Paris has been robbed. It's bloody also because there is a Chinese man who has been beaten to death last year. He was carrying a backpack. A group of young men just thought that he was for sure carrying cash with him, and he didn't have anything with him. So that's, I think, for now, currently, it's the stereotype that I'm dealing with the most. Like the last time that a mom got robbed, it was after a surgery, and then she got it like way over her head. She was like, okay, I can't do this anymore, and she adopted a big dog. So now we have a dog in the family. And I think I deal with this stereotype a lot because I'm not living at home anymore. Now I'm living currently in Brussels, in Belgium. So I'm not close to them, and I'm afraid that something might happen to them, because of this bloody stereotype. Number 6. Can you speak your language? Yes, I can speak Mandarin Chinese, although now my French and my English are more fluent. And I can do regular chit chat, I can bargain, but I miss the vocabulary to have a very deep conversation. And I have a very good accent, so people don't know that I grew up abroad, so it often leads to situations like this. 你是做什么的？我是个金融工程师。I don't speak Wenzhou's dialect. I know it's a pity, but I understand a lot. 聽懂父外國，只有牛黑子西黑子。尿多，嘎啦催速對未？ Number 7. How has being Asian European affected your relationship with your parents? Growing up, I did envy so much the freedom of my fellow classmates. I think in 18 years, only 2 friends came to my home to sleep. And the first time that I slept at someone else's place, I think I was already a grown-up. Being Asian European has affected me pressure-wise. I feel so much pressure to succeed, and it's very difficult for my parents to accept what I study. I'm not studying medicine, I'm not studying finance or law, or I'm studying art. And what is the most difficult for me is that I cannot assure them or myself that I'm sure 100% that I will succeed. And that's very difficult, you know, for my parents to understand that it's really what I love, it's really what I want to do. I think that they came to accept it a little bit, but they do really, I know that they wish that I studied something else. Being in the creative field, I don't think that you can really leave this behind. Like, I need this, and I feel like I would find a way through this. Number 8. How do you feel about your heritage now, and do you identify with it? I identify as Chinese European, not so much as Chinese French, because even though I lived in France for most of my life, I got my nationality quite late, and on the 8th month after getting this nationality, I went abroad to study, and I never went back to France to live really again. And I consider myself more European because I lived in 4 different countries here, although it's like a very small notion of Europe as well. Europe is so diverse. But yeah, I would just say that I'm broadly European plus Chinese. What is your favorite thing about your heritage? 既有牛和子西和子. The food is so amazing. Like, this 饺牛 is not only 饺牛, it's my whole culture in here. Is this going to be a food channel? Is this going to be an art channel? Is this going to be a you and me talking channel? Stay tuned for the next one.